For the past year, I've had an absolute demon on my shoulder. I uploaded a video titled Scott Cawthon Solved Midnight Motorist about 11 months ago. And in that video, I had to accept the fact that I was unequivocally wrong about the minigame that I really wanted to be the one to solve. So I went with the standard fare, went with the most basic explanation for the minigame, and tried to call it a day. But ever since I did, there's been a demon on my shoulder telling me that I called it quits too easy, that I didn't actually have an answer I was satisfied with. And as time went on, I realized something. Nobody was satisfied with the answer we had. Midnight Motorist wasn't actually solved, it was just accepted. People accepted that this was the best answer that we were going to get, and tried to leave it at that. But I can't do that. I can't just sit back and watch everyone around me take an answer even they aren't fully confident in. And recently, I finally made the breakthrough that I was looking for. I found the missing piece that blows this minigame wide open. And today, I'm gonna be the one to put the pieces together. But first, a question. What do you think is underneath the mound in Midnight Motorist? I want you to actively think about all possible options while you're watching this video, and let's see if you can come to the same conclusion that I did. Without further ado, let's begin. To start off, let's talk about this missing piece that I'm referencing. It's something that I stumbled upon by complete accident, really. You see, every other time that I've tried talking about Midnight Motorist, it's because I've been looking for a reason to, aimlessly searching for an answer, just like everyone else was. But this time, it just kinda happened. It was while I was putting the finishing touches on the script for my last video, where I talked about the Fazburger and the implications of it. For those not in the loop, allow me to catch you up to speed. The Fazburger is the theory that all of the buildings and establishments that we see in this series are more or less built on top of each other, or at the very least, within close proximity to each other. And all of them are encapsulated within the Mega Pizzaplex. If you watched the video, you might remember what I said about FNAF 2's placement within the Fazburger and my evidence for it. In case you don't know, here's a quick rundown. In Help Wanted, specifically in the blacklight version of Ennard Vent Repair, you find yourself in Circus Baby's entertainment and rental. You're in an elevator, ready to go down to the bunker that we're all familiar with, but before you do, if you take a look at your surroundings, you'll see some familiar faces, and, well, lack thereof. We're surrounded by the FNAF 2 animatronics, both the wizards and the toys. Now, this is fascinating. These animatronics are only ever seen in the FNAF 2 location, which, by proxy, means that the FNAF 2 location is above Sea Bears. That's as far as I went with that point in the previous video, but as it turns out, there's a lot more to it than you might expect. Let's think geographically for a moment, shall we? Above Sea Bears, otherwise known as the sister location bunker, we can find the FNAF 2 location, with the two areas being connected by an elevator. And if you recall sister location, you'll remember that the Afton house more or less has the exact same setup. Now, if both of these buildings are above Sea Bears with elevators that take you down to it, then logically speaking, these two buildings should be relatively close to each other. Now, I want you to think about that for a moment. Think about FNAF 2 being close to the Afton house. Think about how we suddenly have a building that we have reason to believe is relatively close to the Afton house. And now, think about Midnight Motorist, the minigame that gave us a building that exists within close proximity to the Afton house that we've never had an answer for, and let everything slowly click into place. Fellow theorists, I present to you the missing piece. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, as seen in FNAF 2, is none other than Juniors from Midnight Motorist, the mystery building that we've never had a proper answer for. And if you think that's a stretch, don't worry, because believe it or not, everything that we actually know about Juniors lines up perfectly with the 1987 Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. First off, the name. Juniors. For the longest time, people have been saying that it's a name for a bar, without any real evidence to back that up. Not to say that there are no bars in the world named Juniors, there's plenty of them, but that doesn't mean that the word Juniors naturally correlates with a bar by any means. You know what Juniors does correlate with though? Something more kid-oriented, something with children as the target audience. And what do we see in FNAF 2? A brand new set of animatronics, specifically made to be more kid-friendly. friendly. That was the entire selling point of FNAF 2. New and improved animatronics that could detect predators and were more marketable for children. So, going off of that, this naming convention for juniors makes infinitely more sense than a random bar ever did. And that's not all. Let's talk about the only other thing we actually know about juniors. The green guy's words. He tells us that we're not allowed inside, and that we should know that already. Now, assuming that we're playing as William Afton, why would he specifically be barred from entering a building? Well, as it turns out, we have exactly one example of this in the games. And of course, it comes from FNAF 2. On night 5, Ralph specifically tells us that no previous employees are allowed inside. And guess what? William Afton is exactly that. A previous employee. During the very same phone call that we're told to not let any previous employees inside, we're told that a position on the day shift just became available. Someone literally just got fired on that very day. And we've always assumed that this someone was William Afton himself. And under this assumption, this scene from outside of juniors finally makes sense. We are William Afton. We just got fired from our job at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and now we're not allowed back into the building. There has quite literally never been more evidence for what juniors could be before. Everything about the FNAF 2 location lines up perfectly with it. The physical place that it's in, the name of the building, the fact that we're not allowed inside, even the dice in 5 laps that give us the number 87. It all points to the same conclusion. Juniors was always meant to be FNAF 2's Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. So, what's all of this mean? We have another answer locked in for Midnight Motorist, but there's still plenty more to solve, isn't there? Well, yes, there is. But with FNAF 2 Juniors, we can eliminate some possibilities, and inch closer to the truth than we ever have in the past. However, doing this requires us to do something that I don't think people are gonna like. In order for FNAF 2 as Juniors to work, we'll be forced to discard the most common assumption that the entire community has been operating under. The true meaning of later that night. If you were convinced by Juniors as FNAF 2, then you have to accept an unfortunate fact. Later that night doesn't mean what you think it means. It cannot possibly have anything to do with Charlie's death. At the end of Security Puppet, you find Charlie's body sprawled out in an alley, with tire tracks leading away. Then, you get to Midnight Motorist, and you're literally driving a purple car that's speeding away. At first glance, these connections seem really solid. There's just one problem. Geography. I know you're all probably tired of me bringing this up by now, but just hear me out. If Juniors is the FNAF 2 location, and that's where Charlie died, then why does Midnight Motorist have us driving toward it? If this was the direct follow-up, then we'd be going in the opposite direction. Some of you might be saying, what if she died somewhere else? Unfortunately, that's not possible. We know that Charlie dies at a Fazbear location. Since both times we see her death, there are Fazbear animatronics present. And as of 1987, there are no other Fazbear entertainment establishments that are open. MCM has evidently been closed for years, and as Ralph tells us himself, Fredbear's has also been closed for years.
Yeah, we're gonna try to contact the original restaurant owner. I think the name of the place was Fredbear's Family Diner or something like that. It was closed for years though. I doubt we'll be able to track anybody down.
So, at this point in the timeline, the only place where Charlie can possibly die is outside of the FNAF 2 location. So, after Security Puppet, William should be driving away from it. But at Midnight Motorist, we're doing the exact opposite. Like it or not, if Midnight Motorist 87 is true and FNAF 2 is Juniors, then this taking place directly after Charlie's death just doesn't line up. I don't expect all of you to be convinced by just this though. But that's fine, because I have more proof that this minigame has nothing to do with Charlie's death. Let's talk about the FNAF 2 phone calls real quick. On night 5 of FNAF 2, we're specifically told to not let any previous employees into the building. And then, on night 6, we're told that the building is shut down and that nobody's supposed to be there. Jeremy shows up anyway, but presumably nobody else did. Considering the fact that there are multiple cars parked outside of Juniors, I take it that the building hasn't been shut down yet. This means that Midnight Motorist has to take place specifically on night 5 of FNAF 2. This lines up with us not being allowed into the building. We're a previous employee. The thing about this though, is that Charlie cannot possibly die that late.
Okay, I wanted to ease your mind about any rumors you might have heard lately. You know how these local stories come and go and seldom mean anything. I can personally assure you that whatever is going on out there, however tragic it may be, has nothing to do with our establishment. It's just all rumor and speculation, people trying to make a buck, you know. Our guard during the day has reported nothing unusual, and he's on watch from opening till close.
That's what Ralph tells us on night 3. I want you to let what he said really sink in. He's telling us about rumors that have been spreading about something that happened outside of the establishment, and personally reassures us that it has nothing to do with the establishment. Now, tell me, what could this possibly be? What tragic event could have happened outside the walls of the establishment? Well, we only have one answer that applies: Charlie's death. Charlie is the only character that we've seen die outside of a Fazbear building like this, and we first saw that in FNaF 2, the literal game that we're talking about. That's what this was all in reference to. The tragic event that Ralph talks about here is the same tragic event that we see play out in the FNaF 2 minigames. Altogether, this means that Charlie died before Night 5 of FNaF 2. She most likely died on Night 2 specifically, which gives ample time for rumors to be circulating by Day 3, which would lead to Ralph trying to reassure us about things on Night 3. And if Midnight Motorist is taking place on Night 5, then these two events cannot possibly line up. But then, what does later that night mean? Something has to have happened earlier that night, on Day 5 of FNaF 2. So, if it's not Charlie's death, then what is it? What event is so important that it's being alluded to like this? Well, that's another thing that we can extrapolate from the FNaF 2 phone calls. Earlier, you heard me play a snippet of the Night 3 phone call. Now, let's take a listen to what Ralph says on Night 4.
Okay, so just to update you, there's been somewhat of an investigation going on. We may end up having to close for a few days, I don't know.
So, following up on the rumors that we heard about on Night 3, a formal investigation has begun. I doubt that the police are involved with this investigation, because if they were, then I don't think that the building would still be open for business. So it's probably an internal investigation being led by Fazbear Entertainment. So those rumors we heard about on Night 3, they were serious enough and rampant enough for Fazbear Entertainment themselves to try and figure out what it was that happened. Now, let's take a listen to Night 5's phone call.
Hey, keep a close eye on things tonight, okay? From what I understand, the building is on lockdown. No one is allowed in or out, you know, especially concerning any previous employees. When we get it all sorted out, we may move you to the day shift. A position just became available.
So now, the building is on lockdown. Considering the fact that Ralph isn't surprised by us being here, I take it that certain employees and such are still allowed into the building. But for the most part, Fazbear Entertainment doesn't want people there, especially previous employees. We're also told that a position on the day shift just became available, which means that William Afton was just fired earlier that day, and now they're trying to keep him out. So with that in mind, what do we hear on Night 6?
Hello? What on earth are you doing there? Didn't you get the memo? The place is closed down, at least for a while. Someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back, a yellow one. Someone used it. Now none of them are acting right.
And there it is, the big one. Sometime before Night 6, someone used one of the yellow suits to do something, and now none of the animatronics are acting right. Because of that, the building got completely closed down. Let's be as thorough as possible with our explanation of this. The only someone using a yellow suit here is William Afton, putting on his Spring Bonnie costume. Doing that, he did something big, something that set all of the animatronics off. We know that it wasn't Charlie's death, not only because of the timeline not working out, but because Charlie died outside in the rain, which would mean that wearing the suit would have killed him. This leaves just one option, the other tragedy that takes place in FNaF 2, the DCI. Considering the fact that the memo has already been sent out by the time of Night 6, we can safely assume that it was sent out on Day 6. This means that the bodies had to be discovered earlier than that, presumably on Night 5. Or, in other words, the DCI happened on Day 5, and the bodies were discovered later that night. This is the answer. Charlie's death has been a misdirect that the community has been falling for ever since the minigame's inception. But now, using all of the context at our disposal, we've found the true answer. Midnight Motorist is what happens after 5 children were murdered inside of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza in 1987. And once again, it lines up with everything that we've talked about so far in this video. And just like that, we have another answer. There are 7 big questions when it comes to Midnight Motorist, and so far, we have 3. The yellow fellow is William Afton, Junior's is the FNAF 2 location, and later that night is in reference to the DCI. They all line up with both the minigame and with each other, which means we're almost halfway done. The other questions that need to be solved are the mound, the couch person, the footprint, and the runaway. And these 4 things are arguably the most confusing parts of the minigame. But what if I told you that I have answers for all of them? Answers that line up with everything I've said so far in this video. Let's start off with the easiest of the 4 to answer, the runaway. I'm not gonna waste any time, it's Mike. We know that it's one of Afton's kids, we know that it's a he, and we know that the minigame takes place in 1987. The crying child is long dead by this point in time, and Elizabeth is a girl, so the only answer left is Mike. I don't think that it's worth talking about this any further, as this is literally the only answer that works under this assumption, and it's something that plenty of people believe in anyway. But unfortunately, the rest of the answers that I have aren't nearly as easy to get to. Let's start off with the mound, which has had an interesting history. For the most part, people have been in agreement that it's someone's unmarked grave, usually the crying child's, but some people have gone so far as to say that it's been Elizabeth's or even Mrs. Afton's. But there's also been some people who have entertained the idea of it being an entrance to the sister location bunker. I've messed around with this idea before as well, but honestly, I'm not buying it anymore. With the revelation of the Fazburger and FNAF 2 Juniors, we now have 2 entryways to the sister location bunker really close to each other. I'd be pretty surprised if there was a 3rd one nearby as well. It's technically not impossible, just weird. I think it makes much more sense for this to be an unmarked grave, which raises the question, who's in it? Whose body was buried in the woods where nobody would think to look? Well, it's probably not the crying child. The bite of 83 was a public event, and since we hear him flatline at the end of the game, it's likely that he spent the last hours of his life in a hospital. Why would someone with such a public death be buried somewhere like this? I get that William doesn't love his kids or anything, but still. This feels like somewhere where you'd hide a body, and there's no reason for William to ever hide CC's body. And speaking of hiding the body of an Afton kid, Elizabeth is a curious option. Technically, she fits all of the criteria in my mind. Her death wasn't public, and Afton would want to dispose of the body somewhere where no one would find it. The only reason that I'm not confident in saying this is because, well, I don't really know when Elizabeth would have died. Because of that, I'm really not confident in just saying that it's her. There's also the fact that if this was her grave, I think that Afton would say something about it. I don't know what exactly, but something. All in all, while it's definitely possible, I just think that there's a better option for the mound than Elizabeth. And then there's Mrs. Afton, which, is she even dead? Was she ever alive? Is this even a real character? I don't know. There's barely any evidence of her actually existing. The closest thing we have is the table in Security Breach, which, sure, that's reason enough to believe that she's a real character, but for the only other hint of her existence to be her corpse buried in a forest just feels out of place. I don't think I have anything against it, I just don't want to invoke her name unless there isn't a better substitute. And in this case, there is a better substitute. There's a possibility that nobody's really considered before, because it seemed so unlikely given the circumstances of the minigame. But right now, the context of this video, I think that there's a case to make for it. I think that the person buried in the mound is Charlie. And to back that up, let's talk about what happened when she died. As we previously discussed, Charlie dies on night 2 of FNAF 2. Thing is, she didn't die alone. The puppet went out there and collapsed on top of her. The puppet is active for every night of FNAF 2 though, which means that sometime between her dying and midnight, someone had to go outside and recover the animatronic. But when they do that, they're going to see Charlie's dead body as well. Whoever found the body couldn't just leave it outside for anyone to see, obviously, so they had to act fast and get rid of it. They couldn't bring it inside, there were still kids there, so they had to do the only thing that they could think of at that point, burying the child in the middle of a nearby forest, in an unmarked grave that nobody was ever supposed to find. That's why William doesn't say anything about it if we go there. He doesn't even know what it is, because he isn't the one who buried her. Personally, I think that this explanation makes a lot of sense given everything else that we've talked about in this video, and I'm really confident in it. I think that the only reason that people didn't come to this conclusion sooner is because of the fact that, under the assumption that Midnight Motorist was the night of Charlie's death, this would be kind of impossible. I don't think anyone would have had the time to find Charlie, transport her all the way over here, and bury her before William gets home when he's driving 240 bits per mile. It just didn't make any sense. But now, not only is the option available to us, but it actually makes sense in the context of what we've come to understand about FNAF 2. So, in terms of the mound, I think that there's a good argument to make for it being Charlie. But there's one counter-argument that I'm sure a lot of you are going to make. The fact that we see Charlie's grave multiple times in this series. Once in FNAF 6, and once in the novel trilogy. If she was given a proper burial, then why would she be buried in the middle of a random forest? Well, that's simple. Because she wasn't given a proper burial. At least, not in the games. In FNAF 6, when we see what we presume is her grave in the completionist ending, it's with the rest of the MCI kids. Thing is, I don't think that their bodies are down there. Their bodies decomposed and rotted away inside of the classic animatronics starting all the way back in 1985. These weren't proper burials for any of them. They're empty graves entirely meant for symbolism, so that the parents would have somewhere to grieve for their lost child. And speaking of parents, where does Henry fit into all of this? Listen, I don't think that Henry is nearly as much of a saint as some people seem to believe he is. I hardly even think that he's a good person. Better than William, sure, but that bar is way down under. Anyway, the question becomes this. Would Henry be okay with her being buried in the middle of a forest like this? Would he have even allowed that to happen? Maybe not, but unfortunately, that question doesn't matter. Because of one small detail. Henry wasn't even there. If Henry was involved with the building, then William Afton wouldn't have been hired in the first place, even under a fake name. Henry would have spotted him and shut him out immediately. This is after the MCI, after all. And speaking of the MCI, we know that someone got convicted over it all the way back in 1985, and we know that it wasn't William, considering the fact that he's here. Which means that someone else got convicted over it, and I suspect that it was Henry. One of the reasons that people didn't think that Henry was convicted is because of the Night 5 phone call, when Ralph tells us that they're going to try contacting the original restaurant owner. People have been assuming that he was referring to Henry, and as a result, that he probably wasn't in jail. Thing is, after Secret of the Mimic, we're pretty sure that Henry started off working for Edwin, while Fredbear's Family Diner was open for business. Which would mean Henry isn't the original restaurant owner. It was actually William. I don't think that Henry is around for FNAF 2 at all. If he was there at the beginning, then he wouldn't have let William work at the company. And if he was there at the end, then Ralph wouldn't have said that they're contacting the original restaurant owner, because that's not Henry. So, in short, Henry probably has nothing to do with this game, and as a result, he didn't have anything to do with Charlie being buried. So, as for what happened to her after she died, the decision was left in the hands of the company, who has a history of covering their tracks when it comes to violent crimes.
Fazbear Entertainment is not responsible for damage to property or person. Upon discovering that damage or death has occurred, a missing person report will be filed within 90 days or as soon as property and premises have been thoroughly cleaned and bleached and the carpets have been replaced.
So, yeah. If you ask me, the chances that Fazbear Entertainment just decided to hide the body somewhere where nobody would find it are astronomically high. And with that, I feel pretty confident in saying that Charlie Mound is real. There's another answer down. We're almost done. Just 2 left. Let's go over the doozy. The footprint. The 3-toed footprint in the backyard of the Afton house. My opinion on this has changed a lot over the years. But before getting into who left it, let's talk about why someone was here. As I explained earlier in this video, I think that the DCI happened earlier this night. And with that in mind, I think that the DCI and this footprint are related in some regard. I think that one of the spirits, in response to witnessing the DCI, tried to get someone's attention and lure them toward it. None of the spirits trust anyone that actually works at Freddy's, obviously, so they decide to look for someone else. And the closest person is Mike, the person living in the only house nearby. That's a pretty solid reason for why someone showed up there, so who is it? Not gonna lie, at first, I thought that this was somehow gonna be Charlie's spirit. I spent like half an hour talking about it in call with friends and going over how it could be possible, but ultimately, I've decided against it. This is almost entirely due to the fact that for this to work, it would require Charlie to somehow manifest herself as Shadow Freddy. And, I mean, if Henry is associated with Fredbear and Shadow Freddy is modeled after Golden Freddy, then maybe? But that's still too big of a stretch for me to say confidently. Thankfully, I don't need to make that big of a stretch, because we have another perfectly valid answer, Golden Freddy. Golden Freddy has always been one of the more popular answers for the footprint, due to his habit of teleporting around and essentially projecting himself wherever he wants to be. But I have more reasons to believe that the Golden Freddy left this footprint within the context of the DCI, and the best part is that no matter who you think is possessing Golden Freddy, this explanation still works. But I'm a Golden Duo believer, so I'll be using that for this next part. We know that the actual Golden Freddy suit is in the FNAF 2 building, and I can't imagine that the crying child or Cassidy would be exactly pleased with witnessing the DCI, especially Cassidy, watching as William gets away with another 5 murders. But unfortunately, they can't actually stop him. Cassidy's capable of projecting the Golden Freddy suit and causing some form of hallucinations, but in terms of physically stopping him, no, that's just not something that she can do in this state. However, if there's one thing that we know Cassidy is capable of, it's being able to look through the crying child's memories, as proven by the survival logbook. And if Cassidy can look through his memories, then it's very likely that she could figure out who Mike is. And if she can do that, then she can project herself to him, appearing outside of his window to try and lure him to Freddy's. And as we can see by the fact that Mike breaks out of his room and follows her, this works. Mike follows the Golden Freddy projection all the way to Junior's, gets inside, and that's where he finds it. The DCI. 5 kids, all murdered by his father. Personally, I think that he's been sus of William for a while now, so when he saw this, I think that he knew his father probably had something to do with it. And so, he contacted someone, probably someone that works for Fazbear, not the police. If he told the cops, then the building probably wouldn't have been open for the birth date that we hear about on night 6. And when whoever he contacts gets to the building and sees what happened, well, that's when the building fully closes down. And that's the point of the footprint. It's Cassidy as Golden Freddy, but she's not luring Mike to the mound or anything like that. She's bringing him to Junior's so that he can report the DCI. She probably wanted him to actually do something to William as well, but evidently he didn't accomplish that part. Either way, that's another question answered. And with that, we're left with only one person. One mystery that we don't have an answer for, the couch person. The answer that most people have gone with is Michael, because, well, it kinda just makes sense. It's someone with gray text that's watching TV in the Afton house. That's very closely associated with Mike. Only issue is, Mike is the runaway. Mike can't possibly be in 2 places at the same time, so he's not the couch person now. And the problem with that is, we're kind of out of options. Mike is the runaway, crying child is dead, and Elizabeth is probably not speaking like this. I don't think that this is some random babysitter either, because, well, that just kind of feels like a cop-out answer. Henry is an interesting choice. Under the guise of Midnight Motorist taking place in 1983, this was actually one of the more likely options in my opinion. He's one of the only named adults that we have left, after all. However, There's a multitude of reasons why I don't think that he works under these circumstances. First, as I said earlier, Henry was more than likely the person that was convicted in 1985, so he's probably in jail right now. This alone makes the couch person being Henry impossible. But there's a bit more to it than just that. Take a look outside. You might notice something. There are no cars here. There's plenty of cars outside of Junior's, but there are none here. So, how did the couch person even get here to begin with? It's not like there's anything within reasonable walking distance, apart from Junior's, which I doubt they live there either. To me, the explanation for that is that the couch person lives here, and that the family only owns one car, the one that William's driving. So unless William and Henry are literally living together, then this is just another reason why this doesn't work. Unfortunately, this leaves only one option, and it's the option that I specifically stated that I didn't want to go with earlier. Mrs. Afton. As I said earlier, I think that the table from Security Breach is proof enough that this character does in fact exist. So it's not like the Aftons are test tube babies or anything like that. There is some kind of a mother figure, and I think that it would make sense for some form of guardian figure to be here for this scene. One thing that's been made abundantly clear by William's dialogue in this minigame is that he doesn't want Mike to leave the house, and he especially doesn't want him to go anywhere near that place. With that in mind, it would make sense that someone's staying here to watch over Mike, and to make sure that he's not trying to sneak out. Unfortunately, they do a bad job, evident by the fact that he gets out. I'm gonna be honest. I don't like this part. There's nothing provably wrong with this person being Mrs. Afton, but it just feels wrong. Feels like I'm making a cop-out answer, especially when I've been so confident with everything else that I've said in this video. But as it stands, I think that it's the only possible answer we have under MM87, so I'm gonna go with it. And with that, we have all of our answers. So, real quick, let's recap all of it. On night 2, Charlie dies outside of the FNAF 2 location. Eventually, someone has to go out and find her body when they go to recover the puppet that collapsed on top of her. Once she's found, her body is disposed of, buried in the dirt of an empty forest. But someone saw this happen. Maybe a journalist, maybe just some random passerby, maybe it was Bronwyn Light, we're not sure. But someone saw it and started rumors about it. Rumors about a body outside of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. To counteract this, Fazbear Entertainment launched an internal investigation. Not a police investigation, that would have led to the place potentially being closed down for a few days. So they began their own investigation of the building, and by the end of it, they chose to fire someone. The day guard that went on record, reporting that nothing unusual happened outside. William Afton. This did happen on his watch after all. He presumably got pretty upset by it, and so, on night 5, Ralph warns the night guard to not let any previous employees inside. But unfortunately, it's too late, because by the time that Jeremy gets there, William's already gotten his revenge. That day, while there were still kids in the building, he donned his spring Bonnie costume and murdered 5 children. After this, William drove off for a while, trying to get as far away from the FNAF 2 location as possible, before returning home later that night. And when he gets home, after ignoring his wife's only request, he finds that his son Michael has left the house again. Unbeknownst to him, Mike didn't leave because he randomly got the urge to. Instead, it's because one of William's victims from years ago lured him away. Mike is brought back to the FNAF 2 location, and that's where he finds it, the DCI. All of the children that William murdered earlier that day spread out in the open for anyone to see when they get to the building. And after seeing this, Michael reports the bodies to someone from Fazbear Entertainment, and the building gets closed down. That's the story that we've been trying to piece together for 8 years, only to get stopped at every single turn. But with the use of the Fazburger, we were finally able to get the knowledge that we needed to put everything together. This is what the pieces put together look like. This is the truth of Midnight Motorist. And it's where we're ending things off for today. Thanks for watching. Honestly, I can't believe that I finally have an answer for Midnight Motorist that I'm 100% satisfied with. I've had lots of answers for this godforsaken minigame over the years, but there was always something about it that I didn't like. And even now, I'm still not exactly happy about calling the couch person Mrs. Afton, but I just don't think that there's anyone else that they can be under this interpretation. But regardless, this is my answer for the minigame, and I'm satisfied with it. So, you know what? Who cares if there's one potentially loose thread? I think that everything else is solid enough to stand on its own 2 feet, and that's what really matters. So, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you like and subscribe, leave a comment talking about it, and if you're feeling extra generous, become a member. Every bit of support helps. And if you want to see more of me, check out my streams. I've been live dubbing the visual novel that I borrow all of my art and music from, and it's been a great time. With that, I'm gonna get back to writing. With all of the talk about FNaF 2 I've been doing recently, I think that it's time for me to get to work on a sequel. I'll see you all soon. Take it easy.